The east corridor was meant to be dormant at this hour. It ran along the older wing of the palace, stone walls thick enough to hold the cold even in summer, lights dimmed to maintenance glow after evening rounds. The royal guard assigned to the inner ring knew its rhythms. Doors closed, cameras steady. No foot traffic between 1900 and dawn unless cleared in advance. The door was open. It was not wide, no dramatic breach, just enough to break alignment with the wall, a narrow shadow cutting across the polished floor. The guard stopped 3 paces short, posture unchanged, breath controlled. He did not reach for the handle immediately. He scanned instead. Ceiling corners, camera housing above the arch. No alarms sounded, no red indicators. The guard's boot remained exactly where it had landed. Movement without confirmation was how mistakes began. He touched the comm at his collar, but did not activate it. Instead, he withdrew the slim data slate from his belt and pulled up the corridor access log. The entry was there. Authorized opening at 1842. Clearance code valid. Issued by Palace Administrative Security. That alone should have resolved it. Yet the hinge wear was wrong. This door, rarely used, resisted when opened. It had a tendency to swing back unless held. Now it rested still, angle precise, as if placed. The air inside the corridor felt cooler than the adjacent hall, a subtle difference, but noticeable to someone who stood long watches. He stepped forward, 1 measured pace, and nudged the door with 2 fingers. It did not move. The latch had been overridden. Inside, the corridor smelled faintly of polish and old stone, and something else. Not rot, not smoke. The guard could not have named it, only that it did not belong. Halfway down, near the recessed alcove where a ceremonial vase once stood, lay a small object, a child's toy, wooden, hand-painted, 1 wheel chipped, leaving pale wood exposed beneath blue paint. The guard crouched. He did not touch it. Toys were not permitted beyond the residential wing. This corridor connected service passages and private study rooms. No reason for a child to be here, no record of escort clearance on his slate. He checked the nearest camera feed. The image flickered, then stabilized. Empty corridor. He scrubbed back through the last hour. At 1841, a clean feed. At 1843, motion blur, then a 2-minute skip. The system resumed at 1845, unchanged, no error flags. 2 minutes missing. The guard straightened slowly. His training emphasized proportion. Do not assign intent without cause. Do not assume malice when error suffices. Yet error left traces, alerts, reports. This left silence. He keyed the comm. Post 7 to control, he said, voice even. Confirm authorization East Corridor access at 1842. A pause. Static, low and controlled. Confirmed. Administrative directive. Temporary. Copy, the guard said. He did not ask who issued it. Names complicated things. Instead, he closed the slate and returned it to his belt. Protocol required continuation of patrol, log the irregularity, flag maintenance, move on. He stood another second, eyes on the toy, then stepped fully into the corridor. His boots made no sound. At the far end, a side door stood closed, no light beneath it, no movement. As he turned back, a sound carried faintly through the stone, not loud enough to register as an alarm, a short, broken intake of breath, a child's perhaps, then silence. The guard paused. He waited for several seconds after the sound faded, counting internally, not because it was procedure, but because stillness clarified intent. When nothing followed, no footsteps, no voices, he keyed the calm again. Control, confirm residential movement clearance for minor ward in East Sector. This time the pause was longer. Stand by, Control said. The guard did not move. His eyes remained on the closed side door. He noted its markings, administrative seal intact but recently handled, smudge near the latch, oil transferred from a glove, not his. Post 7, Control returned. Minor ward reassigned at 1838. Temporary relocation. Cleared. By whom? The guard asked, carefully. Another pause. Palace Conduct Office. That office rarely acted directly. It issued guidance, recommendations. Discipline, when it came, was handled through attendance or family liaison, not security rerouting. Copy, the guard said again. He ended the transmission and stood alone with the corridor. Reassignment explained the toy only partially. Escorts were mandatory, 2 minimum, 1 security, 1 attendant. No clearance had passed through his sector according to logs, no clearance markers triggered. He bent again, this time close enough to see faint scuffing near the toy. A heel dragged, small, uneven. The marks ended abruptly, as if lifted. The guard did not photograph it. Evidence protocols applied only after formal incident declaration. He was not there yet. He rose and moved to the side door. His knuckles hovered before the panel. Entering would be a deviation, but standing outside a sealed administrative space while a child was inside, potentially distressed, was also a deviation, just of a quieter kind. He pressed the request panel. No response. He listened. At first nothing. Then, barely audible, a controlled adult voice, calm, firm, words indistinct through the door's thickness, no raised volume, no shouting. That, more than anything, unsettled him. Discipline conducted correctly was visible, open, witnessed. This was concealed. The guard stepped back and keyed his slate, opening the internal map. The side door connected to a consultation room, often used for private briefings. There was an interior camera. He attempted access. Denied. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Access denial from a room holding a minor required override justification. No such justification appeared. He logged a silent flag, non-intrusive, rooted to oversight rather than command. It was a small action, often ignored, but it created a timestamp that could not be erased without notice. From behind the door came a sharper sound, a chair leg scraping, then a brief sharp cry, cut off. The guard's hand closed around the edge of his glove. He adjusted it, smoothing the seam, an old habit when tension rose. He checked the corridor once more. Empty. Cameras active again. He did not breach the door, not yet. Instead, he positioned himself directly outside it, centered, visible to any who might exit. His stance was neutral, observational, as if he was simply another fixed point in the palace's machinery. Inside, the voices resumed, lower now. The guard waited, eyes forward, pulse steady, aware that whatever emerged from that room would determine whether this remained an irregularity or became something else entirely. The door opened without ceremony. No raised voices preceded it, no sign that anything inside had gone wrong. A man stepped out first, middle-aged, dressed in the muted, formal attire of palace administration rather than uniform. His expression was composed, almost thoughtful, as if leaving a meeting that had required patience rather than authority. He acknowledged the guard with a brief nod that did not invite response. Behind him, the child followed. The guard's eyes adjusted instinctively, cataloguing details without pause. The child's posture was stiff, shoulders drawn slightly inward. One sleeve was tugged lower than the other, as though adjusted in haste. The toy was no longer visible. The child did not look at the guard, but neither did they look ahead. Their gaze stayed fixed on the floor, steps measured, too careful for someone of their age. "Escort is no longer required," the administrator said, tone neutral. "The matter has been addressed." The guard did not move aside immediately. He did not block the path either. He stood where he was, forcing a moment of overlap. Close enough now to notice the faint redness around the child's wrist. Not a bruise, not yet, but pressure marks did not need to bloom to be red. "Destination?" the guard asked. The administrator's eyes flicked briefly to him, then away. "Residential wing, West Passage. Attendant will meet them." Escort log shows reassignment, no movement clearance through East Sector. "It was expedited," the administrator replied, "within scope." The guard inclined his head a fraction, acknowledging the answer without accepting it. He stepped aside then, allowing passage. The administrator placed a guiding hand at the child's shoulder. Not forceful, correct, publicly appropriate. As they moved away, the guard remained still until the sound of their footsteps softened into the distance. Only then did he exhale fully. He logged the exit time. He logged the personnel ID. He logged the route taken. None of it would flag automatically. None of it violated protocol on its face. That was the problem. When the corridor returned to silence, the guard retrieved the toy. He held it carefully, fingertips avoiding the chipped edge. There was a name scratched faintly on the underside. Childish letters, uneven. He did not read it aloud. He placed the toy into an evidence sleeve and sealed it without marking it as contraband. Then he resumed patrol. The rest of the hour passed without incident. Guards rotated. Lights dimmed another increment. The palace settled into its controlled nocturnal state, where power flowed quietly through systems and people alike. At 20:10, the guard was relieved and reported to the Internal Operations Office, a small room with no windows and constant low ventilation. A duty officer sat behind the desk, reviewing feeds. "Report," the officer said. The guard delivered it cleanly. Door irregularity, camera interruption, administrative authorization, child reassignment. No conjecture, no emphasis. The officer listened, eyes on the screen, fingers still. "Conduct office has discretion," the officer said when the guard finished, "especially with minors." "Yes, sir," the guard replied. "You're flagging concern." "I'm logging sequence. Concern is implicit." The officer regarded him for a moment, then nodded once. "Noted." That was all. The guard returned to his quarters later than usual. He removed his gloves, set them precisely on the shelf, and washed his hands longer than required. The water was cool. He welcomed it. Sleep did not come easily, not because of fear or anger, but because unanswered details lingered. The reassignment time, the lack of escort logs, the pressure marks. By morning, he had decided on his next step. The residential wing was quieter than the administrative sector. its corridors softened by carpeting and indirect light. Guards here walked slower, not from leniency, but from design. Sound carried differently around children. Authority was meant to feel present without being heavy. The guard was not assigned to this wing that day. He requested temporary coverage under the pretext of rotation balancing. The request was approved without question. He positioned himself near the West Passage intersection, where attendants often moved between rooms. He did not search, he waited. It took nearly 40 minutes. The child emerged accompanied by an attendant in standard uniform. The child's expression had not changed since the night before. Composed, closed. The wrist was now covered by a longer sleeve. The guard did not approach. He watched as they passed, noting the attendant's posture, alert, professional, but cautious, as if instructed to be. Later, during a scheduled break, the guard accessed the internal assignment ledger, not the security log, the care ledger. Access was restricted, but his clearance allowed read-only oversight under safeguarding provisions. The entry was there. Temporary disciplinary guidance. Duration, 1 session. Supervisor listed. Location, consultation room, East Wing. Justification, behavioral non-compliance. No specifics. The supervisor's name matched the administrator from the night before, a senior figure, respected, known for discretion. The guard closed the ledger and sat back. Behavioral non-compliance covered a wide range of actions. It could mean refusal to attend a lesson, a tantrum, silence. It could also be misused. At midday briefing, the guard raised the issue obliquely. He asked about escort protocol deviations during conduct office interventions. The room stilled slightly. Not tension, awareness. Escorts are adjusted case by case, the shift commander said. We trust internal offices to operate within mandate. And camera interruptions? The guard asked. The commander looked directly at him. Are you alleging interference? No, sir, the guard said. I'm seeking clarity. Clarity is provided through channels, the commander replied. You logged sequence. That's sufficient. The meeting moved on. That afternoon, the guard received a quiet notice on his slate, a reminder, professional boundaries, discretion expectations. He acknowledged it without comment. In the evening, as his shift ended, he passed the West Passage again. The child was there, seated on a bench, hands folded, waiting for an attendant. The toy was back in their possession, held tightly now, paint-chipped edge pressed against the palm. The guard slowed slightly as he passed. He did not look directly. He did not speak, but he adjusted his pace so that his presence lingered just long enough to be noticed. The child glanced up, just once. Their eyes met his. There was no plea in them, no accusation, only recognition. The guard continued on, aware now that whatever had occurred had not ended with the session. It had been recorded, categorized, and justified. And if it happened once without consequence, it would happen again. The question was no longer whether protocol allowed it. The question was how much weight protocol could bear before it failed someone it was meant to protect. The consultation wing was not meant for observation. Its architecture discouraged it. Thick walls, soft corners, no straight sight lines, unless you stood exactly where someone once decided a guard should never need to stand. The guard knew those places anyway. Years of quiet duty taught him where sound leaked, where shadows held shape. He was not scheduled for the East Wing that afternoon. He arrived under secondary coverage, filling a gap left by a training rotation. No objections were raised, no questions asked. The palace ran on assumptions as much as orders. The corridor was brighter than the night before. Sunlight filtered through high windows that did not open. Dust hung in the air, visible only when the light caught it at an angle. The guard took position near a structural column opposite the consultation room. From there, he could see the door without appearing to watch it. He waited. Time moved slowly in that wing. Footsteps echoed long after they passed. Somewhere deeper inside, a clock marked the hour with a muted chime. The guard kept his hands folded behind his back, posture neutral, eyes steady. The door opened. The same administrator entered alone, no attendant, no escort. His pace was unhurried. He carried a thin folder, nothing marked on the cover. He glanced once down the corridor, not searching, simply registering space. His eyes passed over the guard without pause. A moment later, the child was brought in by an attendant, different from the one before, younger, less practiced at hiding concern. The attendant's hand rested lightly at the child's upper arm, guiding, not gripping. The child walked compliantly, gaze forward, toy absent this time. At the threshold, the administrator stopped them. "That will be all," he said. The attendant hesitated, just long enough to be noticed. "Sir," she said, quietly, "escort protocol." "I'll take responsibility," the administrator replied, not sharply, calmly, as though explaining an administrative correction rather than issuing a command. The attendant released the child. Her hand lingered a fraction too long, then withdrew. She nodded and stepped back, casting one brief glance down the corridor. Her eyes met the guard's. She said nothing. The door closed. The guard remained still. He did not shift his weight. He did not adjust his stance. Any movement now would announce attention. He listened instead. At first, the voices inside were indistinct. The walls absorbed most of the sound, leaving only rhythm. Adult speech, even-paced, controlled. The child responded once, softly, a single word too quiet to identify. Minutes passed. Then the tone changed. Not louder, sharper. Words became more clipped. The guard heard the scrape of a chair, the faint thud of something light contacting a surface, a table perhaps. He stepped half a pace closer to the column. From this angle, sound carried more clearly through the ventilation seam. "You will stand still," the administrator said. The child's reply was lost, but there was movement, fabric shifting, a breath drawn too quickly. The guard's jaw set, not visibly, but with intent. He adjusted his position again, marginally, until he could see the lower edge of the door. A shadow moved beneath it. 2 sets of feet, one small, one planted firmly. Then the child cried out, not loudly, a sharp intake followed by a broken sound that suggested surprise more than pain. The administrator spoke immediately after, voice low, controlled. "You are making this difficult." The guard did not hesitate now. He moved forward, steps measured but deliberate, closing the distance until he stood directly outside the door. His presence was unmistakable. Inside, something shifted, a pause. The guard did not reach for the handle, not yet. He listened again. The child spoke this time, words still unclear, but the tone had changed, strained, breathing uneven. "You are making this difficult," the administrator said. There was no anger in it, only impatience. The guard rested his hand flat against the door panel. He felt vibration through the material, movement. A grip tightened, then adjusted. This was no longer a question of interpretation.
The guard knocked once, firm, precise. The sound carried authority without aggression. Silence followed. Not the startled silence of interruption, but the deliberate pause of someone deciding how to proceed. "Yes?" the administrator called from inside. "Security," the guard said. "Routine check." Another pause. Footsteps approached. The door opened partially, chain still engaged. The administrator's face appeared in the gap. Up close he looked composed, hair neat, expression neutral. His breathing was steady. "This is not necessary," he said. "Safeguarding requires visual confirmation," the guard replied. His tone matched the administrator's, calm, unyielding. The administrator's eyes flicked briefly downward, then back up. He unhooked the chain and opened the door fully. The child stood beside the table. One arm was held just above the wrist, not violently, not theatrically, but the grip was tight enough to blanch the skin beneath the fingers. The child's shoulders were rigid. Their free hand was clenched into the fabric of their sleeve. The guard stepped inside. One step only, enough to change the dynamic. "Release," he said. The word was not raised. It did not need to be. "This is a conduct session," the administrator replied. "You are exceeding your remit. Grip exceeds acceptable correction parameters, safety concern." The administrator looked at him, assessing, measuring rank, clearance, risk. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the administrator loosened his hold slightly, as if to demonstrate compliance without conceding fault. The guard did not accept partial measures. He stepped closer, placing himself between the administrator and the child, his body angled just enough to create separation without contact. "I'll take the child to the attendant." "That won't be necessary," the administrator replied. "We were nearly finished." The guard met his gaze. "This concludes the session." It was not a request. The administrator's jaw tightened. The expression passed quickly, replaced by something colder, calculation. "You understand what you're doing," he said. "Yes," the guard replied. Another second passed. Then the administrator released the child's arm completely. The guard placed a steady hand at the child's back, not guiding, simply present. He did not look down. He did not speak to them. He turned and led them toward the door at a controlled pace. As they exited, the administrator spoke once more. "This will be reviewed." The guard did not respond. Outside, the corridor felt cooler. The child's breathing began to slow, though their posture remained tight. The guard signaled discreetly to the attendant stationed down the hall. She approached immediately, concern visible now that authority had shifted. "Escort the child to the residential wing. Log full transfer." "Yes, sir," she replied. As they moved away, the child glanced back once. Their eyes met the guard's again. This time there was something new there, not relief, awareness. The guard remained where he was until they disappeared around the corner. Then he turned back toward the consultation room. The administrator stood just inside the doorway, arms folded now, expression unreadable. "You've created a record," the administrator said. "Yes," the guard replied. "You've also created a problem." The guard inclined his head slightly. "Problems are addressed through process." The administrator smiled thinly. "So they are." The door closed. The guard stood alone in the corridor, the echo of the child's cry still present in his ears, faint but persistent. He activated his slate and began logging the event, knowing each word would be weighed, questioned, and possibly used against him. He chose them carefully. This was no longer about an irregularity observed from a distance. This was an intervention, and interventions, once made, could not be undone.
The report took longer than expected, not because the facts were unclear, but because each sentence carried weight beyond its length. The guard sat at the narrow desk in the secondary operations room, slate angled to avoid glare from the overhead strip light. The room was cool, deliberately so. It kept people alert. It also discouraged lingering. He documented time, location, personnel present. He described the grip using standardized language, pressure sufficient to restrict movement, sustained beyond corrective necessity. He avoided inference. He avoided motive. He noted the child's response only as observable behavior, vocal distress, resistance, elevated breathing. When he finished, he routed the report through standard security channels and added the safeguarding flag. That second action diverted a copy to the Palace Oversight Office. It was within his authority. It was also rarely appreciated. The confirmation ping came back almost immediately. Report received. No acknowledgement beyond that. He returned to duty. The palace did not pause for documentation. Corridors required coverage. Doors required watching. The rhythm resumed, but it felt altered now, as though a subtle shift had occurred beneath the surface. By mid-afternoon, the first message arrived. Request for clarification. Origin, Security Command Liaison. He was instructed to attend a review meeting at 1700 hours. Location, Internal Affairs Conference Room B. Conference Room B was windowless and slightly smaller than regulation, a design choice meant to reduce perceived authority gaps. 3 chairs on one side of the table, 1 on the other. The guard arrived early and stood until told to sit. 2 officers entered together, 1 senior commander from security operations, 1 representative from palace conduct. Both were familiar, neither appeared hostile. "Let's keep this straightforward," the commander said, taking the seat opposite him. "You intervened in a conduct office session." "I intervened in a safeguarding concern," the guard replied. The conduct representative folded his hands. "Our office has mandate to conduct corrective sessions privately." "Privacy does not negate safety," the guard said. The commander raised his hand slightly. "No one is disputing that. The question is proportionality." The guard nodded once. He expected this. "You assessed excessive force based on what criteria?" The guard recited them: training doctrine, safeguarding thresholds, observable distress indicators. He did not raise his voice. He did not defend himself beyond the facts. The conduct representative listened, expression neutral. When the guard finished, he leaned forward slightly. "You're aware the supervisor involved has 30 years of service, no prior complaints." "I'm aware," the guard replied. "And you're aware the child has a documented history of resistance behaviors." "I reviewed the ledger. The behaviors listed do not justify physical restraint." The room fell quiet. The commander glanced at the conduct representative, then back at the guard. "You understand," the commander said carefully, "that by escalating this outside the chain, you've placed command in a difficult position." "I followed the chain," the guard replied. "I also followed safeguarding procedure." "That procedure is discretionary," the conduct representative said. "It assumes judgment." "Yes," the guard said. "That's why it exists." No one spoke for several seconds. The commander exhaled slowly. "For now, this is under review. You'll remain on duty, but will be reassigned away from the residential wing." The guard accepted this without visible reaction. Reassignment was expected. "Do not discuss this incident," the conduct representative added, "with anyone." "I haven't," the guard said.
You will also submit a supplemental report detailing your decision-making process. Yes, sir. The meeting ended without resolution, no reprimand, no validation. As the guard left the room, he was aware that the matter had shifted. It was no longer about what happened in the consultation room. It was about who was permitted to decide when something had gone too far. The supplemental report was more difficult than the first. It required the guard to articulate instinct without naming it. He described training responses, environmental cues, the escalation of distress. He avoided the word child where possible, using minor ward instead. Language mattered. Emotional terms invited dismissal. He submitted the report before end of shift. That night, his access permissions changed. Nothing dramatic. He retained his clearance, but certain feeds now required secondary authentication. The residential wing schedule no longer appeared on his default dashboard. Subtle adjustments, administrative, easily explained as routine. Pressure rarely announced itself openly in the palace. It arrived through omission. The next day, he was assigned to outer corridor rotation, less visibility, fewer interactions, a post designed for presence, not observation. He performed it without complaint. Midway through the shift, a senior officer approached him, not command, a peer, older, experienced. Off the record, the officer said quietly, stopping beside him as if to inspect a wall fixture. You stepped on something sensitive. The guard replied, I stepped where I was trained. The officer nodded slightly. Just be aware, Conduct Office doesn't like scrutiny. Neither does command when it comes from below. The guard said nothing. Later, during a routine systems check, he noticed a discrepancy. The camera interruption from the initial night had been reclassified. The 2-minute gap now listed as scheduled maintenance. He flagged it again. This time, the confirmation took longer. That evening, as he stood watch near the outer atrium, he saw the child across the open space, walking with an attendant. The child's pace was steady, their posture still guarded but functional. The toy was absent again. The guard did not react. He maintained his post, but he logged the observation privately. The chain of command had closed ranks, that much was clear. Each office protecting its mandate, each decision insulated by procedure. What unsettled the guard was not the resistance, it was the quiet efficiency with which the system adapted, absorbing the disruption, smoothing its edges, and continuing forward as if nothing had occurred. He understood now that any further action would carry cost. He also understood that stopping now would mean accepting that cost as justification. As his shift ended, a final notice appeared on his slate. Mandatory attendance, internal review panel. Date pending. He acknowledged it and powered the slate down. The palace lights dimmed for night cycle. The corridors cooled. Somewhere beyond his post, the child slept under watchful systems designed to protect them. The guard stood at attention, aware that the next step would no longer be about observation or reporting. It would require action that protocol could not easily absorb, and once taken, it would define the remainder of his service. The summons arrived without explanation. No agenda attached, no names listed beyond the panel designation. The guard reported as ordered, uniform precise, expression neutral. He did not review his previous reports again. He knew them well enough. The internal review panel occupied a higher floor than most security offices, closer to the administrative spine of the palace. The air there was warmer,
conditioned for comfort rather than alertness. Carpets softened footsteps. Walls absorbed sound. It was a place designed to make disagreement quiet. 3 people waited inside, one from Security Command, one from Palace Conduct, one legal observer, present but silent. No one invited the guard to sit. He remained standing. "We've reviewed your filings," the security representative began. "There are concerns." The guard inclined his head slightly. He did not ask what kind. "You acted outside direct instruction," the conduct representative said, "in a sensitive disciplinary context." "I acted within safeguarding authority," the guard replied. "That authority is interpretive," the representative said, "and interpretations vary." The guard said nothing. Silence was not admission. The legal observer shifted slightly, but did not speak. "We've reviewed your filings," the security representative began. "There are concerns." The guard inclined his head slightly. He did not ask what kind. "You acted outside direct instruction," the conduct representative said, "in a sensitive disciplinary context." "I acted within safeguarding authority," the guard replied. "That authority is interpretive," the representative said, "and interpretations vary." The guard said nothing. Silence was not admission. The legal observer shifted slightly, but did not speak. "You placed hands on a superior official's process," the security representative continued. "That has implications." "I placed myself between a minor and applied force. I did not restrain the official." The conduct representative's mouth tightened briefly. "Your language is careful." "It's accurate," the guard replied. There was a pause. The security representative glanced at the other 2, then folded his hands. "This panel is prepared to issue a formal reprimand. Failure to follow command cohesion, insubordination narrowly defined." The guard absorbed this without visible reaction. A reprimand would remain on his record. It would limit advancement. It would justify reassignment. "However," the security representative continued, "alternatively, you may accept reassignment without formal action, quiet resolution." The guard understood the offer. Compliance in exchange for erasure. The incident would be contained. The system would move on. He did not answer immediately. "Before I respond," the guard said, "I request confirmation of the child's current safeguarding status." The conduct representative looked displeased. "That is outside the scope of this panel." "It is central to my decision," the guard said. Another pause, shorter this time. "The child is under standard care. No further disciplinary sessions scheduled." The wording was precise, too precise. The guard nodded once. "Thank you." He straightened slightly. "I declined the alternative." The room shifted, not dramatically. Chairs did not scrape, but attention sharpened. "You're choosing the reprimand?" the security representative said. "I'm choosing record," the guard replied. The conduct representative leaned back. "You realize this will frame future actions?" "Yes," the guard said. The reprimand was issued verbally, pending documentation. The meeting ended soon after. No one escorted him out. He did not look back. He returned to duty with the weight of finality settling in. He had been marked now, not as disloyal, not as reckless, but as someone unwilling to smooth edges. That afternoon his reassignment became official. Temporary detail, structural oversight, a position that sounded important but removed him from direct protective proximity. He accepted it without comment. 2 days later, the incident repeated. Not in the same room, not with the same official, but close enough to confirm pattern. The guard observed it from across a gallery. A different child-sized figure, a different authority figure, a guiding hand applied with unnecessary firmness, a pause when resistance met pressure. The guard did not hesitate this time.
He moved without signaling, not running, not rushing, simply altering course in a way that brought him into alignment with the scene. The authority figure, an instructional supervisor this time, had taken the child by the arm to redirect them away from a public space. The grip was not brutal. It did not need to be. The child's shoulder rose defensively, body turning away. "Release," the guard said, voice even. The supervisor turned, surprise flickering across their face before settling into controlled irritation. "This does not concern you," the supervisor said. "It concerns safety," the guard replied. "I am authorized," the supervisor said, tightening the grip slightly, perhaps unconsciously. That was enough. The guard stepped in and placed his hand over the supervisor's wrist, not squeezing, not jerking, just enough to interrupt leverage. He rotated gently, breaking the hold with a practiced motion taught for de-escalation, not combat. The child was free. The supervisor recoiled half a step, more from shock than pain. "You will step back," the guard said. The words carried no threat. They did not need to. Other guards had noticed now, not rushing, watching, assessing. "You've crossed a line," the supervisor said. "Yes," the guard replied, deliberately. He guided the child toward an approaching attendant, placing himself between them and the supervisor until the transfer was complete. He did not touch the child beyond a light stabilizing presence at shoulder height. He did not speak to them. Once the child was gone, the supervisor straightened their clothing. "This will not go the way you think," they said. "I'm aware," the guard replied. Within the hour, he was relieved of duty, not detained, not restrained, simply informed that his presence was no longer required on the floor. His weapon was logged, his badge deactivated temporarily, administrative suspension pending review. He complied without resistance. In the holding office, alone, he documented the second intervention in the same measured language as before: time, location, force applied, force interrupted. He attached the prior reprimand reference. He did not argue, he did not plead. When he finished, he sat back and waited. He did not know what the outcome would be: demotion, discharge, quiet removal. What he did know was this: the pattern was now undeniable. 2 incidents, 2 different authority figures, similar methods, similar justifications. The system could absorb 1 disruption. It could not ignore 2. As night fell outside the high windows, the guard sat under constant light, hands folded, posture unchanged. Somewhere beyond the administrative layers, children moved through corridors designed to protect them. For the first time since entering service, the guard was no longer standing watch, but the line he had broken was now visible, and once visible, it could not be unmarked. The room assigned for his suspension review was not labeled as such. It carried a neutral designation: Operational Assessment Suite, printed in small lettering beside the door. Inside, the light was constant and diffuse, calibrated to remove shadow. The guard recognized the intent immediately. Nothing here was meant to feel dramatic. Everything was meant to feel reasonable. He sat alone for nearly an hour before anyone entered. When they did, it was not the full panel he expected. Only 2 officials this time. One from security oversight, one from legal compliance. No representative from conduct. That absence was deliberate. A recorder activated automatically as the door sealed.
"This is an after-action review," the security oversight officer said, "not a disciplinary hearing, for now." The guard acknowledged with a slight nod. "We will walk through both incidents," the legal officer continued, "chronologically. You will answer directly. You will not speculate." "Yes," the guard said. They began with the first intervention, the consultation room, the grip, the child's reaction. The guard answered in the same language he had used in his reports, consistent, controlled, observable facts only. The recorder captured everything. When they reached the second incident, the tone shifted. "You initiated physical contact with a supervisor," the legal officer said. "I interrupted applied force," the guard replied. "By placing your hand on their wrist, yes. Without instruction, yes." The security oversight officer leaned forward slightly. "Why did you not call for assistance?" "Delay would have extended contact," the guard said. "The child was already resisting." "You assessed risk in real time." "Yes." The legal officer exchanged a glance with the security officer. "Both authority figures deny excessive force," the legal officer said. "They describe corrective guidance." The guard did not respond immediately. Then, "Their denial does not change the physical indicators." "Which are what?" the security officer asked. "Grip placement, duration, the child's involuntary response." "Those are subjective," the legal officer said. "They are trained criteria." Silence followed, not confrontational, evaluative. "We have reviewed footage," the security officer said. "There are gaps." The guard's eyes lifted slightly. "Gaps?" "Camera angles, maintenance windows, partial occlusion." The guard absorbed this. He had expected it. "However," the officer continued, "we also have testimony from 2 attendants." The guard remained still. "Corroborate elevated distress," the legal officer said. "Not abuse, but deviation." The words were carefully chosen. The security officer folded his hands. "This places the institution in a difficult position." The guard said nothing. "If we frame this as misconduct by authority figures," the legal officer said, "we undermine internal autonomy." "And if you frame it as misconduct by me," the guard said, "you normalize physical correction beyond safeguard limits." The legal officer studied him. "That is an interpretation. Yes, like all of this." The review recessed without conclusion. The guard was returned to limited duty pending outcome. Not reinstated, not dismissed. Suspended in a narrow space between. Days passed, then a week. During that time, he was not permitted floor access. He was assigned to records oversight, verifying logs, timestamps, compliance forms. Work designed to feel procedural, detached. It was there that the pattern emerged fully. Not dramatic, not obvious, just repetition. Minor reassignments labeled behavioral guidance. Escort deviations marked as administrative discretion. Camera interruptions attributed to maintenance. Always brief, always aligned with conduct sessions. Individually, they were unremarkable. Together, they formed a shape. The guard documented nothing yet. He observed, cross-referenced, built sequence in his own mind. At the end of the 8th day, he was summoned again. Same room, same lighting. This time, the conduct representative was present. "We are prepared to close this matter," the security oversight officer said, "with a finding of procedural overreach on your part. Suspension lifted, formal warning issued." The guard understood what was being offered. restoration at the cost of silence. You would return to service, the officer continued, with limitations. And the pattern? The guard asked. The conduct representative's expression hardened slightly. There is no pattern. There is, the guard said. I've reviewed 12 comparable entries. The room stilled. You were not authorized to conduct trend analysis, the conduct representative said. I was assigned to records, the guard replied. I read them. The legal officer interjected carefully. What are you alleging? Misuse of corrective authority, the guard said. Systematic avoidance of oversight. That is a serious accusation, the conduct representative said. Yes, the guard replied. Silence stretched. Finally, the security oversight officer spoke. If you pursue this formally, you will not be protected. I'm aware, the guard said. You will likely be discharged, the legal officer added. I know. You will not be thanked. The guard looked at them steadily. I didn't intervene to be thanked. Another pause, this one longer. The conduct representative leaned forward. Why continue? The guard considered the question, not emotionally, precisely. Because the children don't have access to records, and someone has to notice when procedures are used to hide force. No one spoke after that. The meeting ended without resolution again. That night, alone in his quarters, the guard began drafting a final report. Not an incident log, not a complaint, a record. He cited entries, times, deviations. He used institutional language. He removed himself from the narrative as much as possible. When he finished, he encrypted it and queued it for submission to the Oversight Archive, the only channel that could not be quietly amended without trace. He knew what would follow. He submitted it anyway. By morning, his suspension status changed. Not reinstated, reassigned. Permanent. The system had responded. Now it was his turn to decide what standing watch would mean from the margins.
The reassignment notice was brief. No explanation, no justification beyond operational necessity. The guard read it once, then again, confirming what he already understood. He was being moved out of the central palace structure entirely. External perimeter oversight, a post that required experience but offered no proximity. It was not exile, it was erasure by distance. He acknowledged the order and began preparations immediately. Equipment was returned, access credentials updated. His presence in internal systems was reduced to what was strictly required. The palace did not sever ties abruptly, it loosened them. Before leaving the central wing for the last time, the guard requested access to his submitted report. The Oversight Archive confirmed receipt. Status, under review. Immutable flag, active. That flag mattered. It meant the record could not be deleted, but it could be amended. He discovered the amendment 2 days later. While reviewing routine logs from his new post, a quiet stretch of outer wall overlooking formal gardens, he accessed the archive to check status. The report was still there. The content remained, but a supplementary annotation had been added. Contextual clarification appended by Conduct Office. The guard opened it. The language was precise, polished. It reframed the documented deviations as localized misjudgments under high-pressure caregiving conditions. It emphasized the absence of lasting injury. It cited institutional trust. It concluded with a recommendation, no systemic issue identified.
The guard read it without visible reaction. The facts he had submitted were intact: times, entries, patterns. But the conclusion now guided interpretation away from misuse and toward inevitability. Not denial, dilution. He closed the file. Later that afternoon, a courier arrived at the perimeter office. Not official, no insignia, just a sealed envelope addressed by hand. Inside was a single sheet, no letterhead. "Thank you for noticing," it read. "They told me not to talk about it, but I remember." No signature, no name. The guard folded the paper carefully and placed it in his locker. Not as evidence, as confirmation. That evening, as the light faded over the gardens, he reviewed his remaining options. Formal appeal would trigger retaliation. Informal disclosure would be dismissed. Public exposure would harm the very children he sought to protect. The system had responded in the only way it knew, by smoothing the record until it no longer cut. He adjusted his stance and continued his watch.
Weeks passed. From the perimeter, the palace looked unchanged. Ceremonial schedules continued. Flags rose and fell. Children crossed courtyards, escorted by attendants and guards, who believed, sincerely, that the system worked. The guard did not interfere again. He did not need to. The amended record did not erase the original. It sat beside it, a quiet contradiction embedded in official memory. Anyone who looked closely enough would see the seams. Someone did. A junior analyst from Oversight requested clarification on one of the timestamps. Then another question followed, then a third, routed through a different channel. The guard responded factually, minimally. He did not editorialize. He did not accuse. He simply confirmed. The Conduct Office issued another clarification, longer this time, more defensive. The questions did not stop. Change did not arrive dramatically. No announcements, no suspensions, but escort protocols tightened subtly. Camera maintenance windows narrowed. Conduct sessions were relocated to rooms with mandated observation panes. No one referenced the guard's report. They did not need to. One afternoon, as he stood watch near the outer gate, a small procession passed through the gardens beyond the wall. Among them was the child from the first incident, walking with an attendant. The toy was back in their hand. The chipped wheel had been repaired with a thin metal pin. The child did not see him. That was as it should be. The guard remained at his post until relieved, then logged out for the day. As he secured his equipment, a notice appeared on his slate. Status update, Oversight archive, annotation locked, further amendments restricted. He acknowledged it and powered the device down. The record was no longer mutable. It would not undo what had already happened. It would not punish those responsible, but it would stand. Sometimes that was enough. As night settled over the perimeter, the guard took his place once more, not in the center of power, not near the child, but still watching, still noticing, and ensuring that, at the very least, the truth remained where it could be found. The perimeter post settled into routine: dawn checks, midday patrols, evening handover. From this distance, the palace revealed its structure more clearly, less pageantry, more logistics. Supply vehicles entered through timed gates. Maintenance crews rotated with mechanical precision. Nothing moved without reason, even if the reason was no longer visible. The guard learned the rhythms quickly.
He did not resent the reassignment. Resentment required expectation. He had adjusted his expectations. From the outer wall, he could no longer hear the internal chimes marking hours. Instead, time was measured by light across stone and the changing tone of the gardens beyond the fence. The work was quieter, lonelier. It required less judgment, more patience. Yet the responsibility remained. He continued to file reports, short, precise, unremarkable. He avoided drawing attention. Oversight no longer contacted him directly, but their questions filtered through others. He answered them all the same way, clearly, minimally, without interpretation. One evening during a routine shift change, a junior guard hesitated before leaving. "Sir," the guard said, lowering his voice, "they've updated the escort manual." The older guard nodded once. The perimeter post settled into routine. Dawn checks, midday patrols, evening handover. From this distance, the palace revealed its structure more clearly. Less pageantry, more logistics. Supply vehicles entered through timed gates. Maintenance crews rotated with mechanical precision. Nothing moved without reason, even if the reason was no longer visible. The guard learned the rhythms quickly. He did not resent the reassignment. Resentment required expectation. He had adjusted his expectations. From the outer wall, he could no longer hear the internal chimes marking hours. Instead, time was measured by light across stone and the changing tone of the gardens beyond the fence. The work was quieter, lonelier. It required less judgment, more patience. Yet the responsibility remained. He continued to file reports, short, precise, unremarkable. He avoided drawing attention. Oversight no longer contacted him directly, but their questions filtered through others. He answered them all the same way, clearly, minimally, without interpretation. One evening during a routine shift change, a junior guard hesitated before leaving. "Sir," the guard said, lowering his voice, "they've updated the escort manual." The older guard nodded once. "I saw." "They're stricter now." "Yes." The junior guard shifted, uncertain. "Do you think, was that because of—" The older guard did not let him finish. "Procedures change," he said. "That's how systems learn." The junior guard nodded and departed, relieved to have said something without having to name it. Later that night, the guard reviewed the updated protocols himself. Small changes, mandatory dual presence, documented touch thresholds, clear language around restraint, nothing revolutionary. But it was there. He closed the file and returned his attention to the perimeter. Weeks later, during a state function, movement increased across the grounds. Additional security, temporary barriers, controlled access points. From his post, the guard watched the procession paths carefully, aware that visibility often created complacency. Near midday, a familiar figure crossed the inner garden path beyond the wall. The child, older now, or perhaps simply standing straighter, walked beside two attendants. Their pace was unhurried, their posture relaxed in a way it had not been before. As they passed a shaded arch, the child paused briefly, distracted by something unseen. One attendant reached out instinctively, then stopped short. The hand hovered, then withdrew. Weeks later, during a state function, movement increased across the grounds. Additional security, temporary barriers, controlled access points. From his post, the guard watched the procession paths carefully,
aware that visibility often created complacency. Near midday, a familiar figure crossed the inner garden path beyond the wall. The child, older now, or perhaps simply standing straighter, walked beside two attendants. Their pace was unhurried, their posture relaxed in a way it had not been before. As they passed a shaded arch, the child paused briefly, distracted by something unseen. One attendant reached out instinctively, then stopped short. The hand hovered, then withdrew. The attendant knelt instead, speaking quietly, waiting. The child nodded and continued on. The guard did not move. He did not record the moment. He did not need to. That evening, as the palace lights shifted into night cycle, the guard completed his final patrol and logged out. He stood for a moment longer than required, hands resting lightly at his sides, listening to the muted sounds of the grounds. He thought of the record, locked now, incomplete perhaps, but intact. He thought of the alternative. The guard turned from the wall and walked back toward the post office, footsteps steady. Tomorrow he would return, and the day after that, and the day after that. Standing watch was not about proximity to power. It was about remaining where you were placed, alert enough to notice when something small did not belong, and disciplined enough to act when noticing was no longer enough. The palace slept behind him. The guard remained awake.